Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today, we're going to talk, and I don't quite know how to put this, but I spoke at a college class not too long ago, and while I was at that class, one of the questions I had, because we were talking about the evil that I'd seen in prison, we talked about, the way people hurt each other and that type of stuff that we saw in prison. And so I was talking to this college class about that, and it was a Christian college. But it kind of surprised me because one of the students asked me, he said, well, how do you reconcile, God versus corrections? And I had never looked at it as God versus corrections, but I can tell you that as a correctional officer and 29 years in corrections, I have spent a lot of time dealing with or trying to understand where my job had a place in my faith. And it's been disheartening over the years, and it has probably bothered my faith, and I'm not as strong as I should be in many ways. But I got to thinking, I can't be the only one who has these thoughts. So instead of doing a podcast just from my point of view, I reached out and looked for someone who might have another point of view. And someone I worked with for quite a while at the Federal Medical Center in Springfield, Missouri, was Dan O'Dean. He was the chaplain there. He's been a chaplain for a very long time, not only 20 plus years in the federal prison system, but even when he was in the military for many years, and we'll talk about that a little because I want to hear some about that. But I contacted him and asked him if he'd be part of this podcast and kind of have a talk with me. We'll see where this goes, but talk about God versus corrections, I guess. Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
I'm just excited to have you here. I don't think I could have found a better person to do this particular podcast with your experience. You've been doing chaplaincy for a very long time.
With the federal system, it was moved around, and the last 7 years there at the medical center, and now I am at the National Office for the Assemblies of God, and it's my privilege to be able to oversee or represent, maybe that's a better word, represent our endorsed prison chaplains, prison and jail chaplains throughout the United States. So after you spend all those years in corrections and working, inside prisons and such, it's nice to be able to share wisdom and kind of know. It takes another correctional person to understand how a correctional person feels and what they're experiencing,
Absolutely.
What they're going through.
I can't imagine that anybody could do that job that you do, which is recruiting prison chaplains and getting them started.
Yeah, we that's all part of it: recruiting, training, support, resourcing, all various things. Just interceding for them sometimes between the system and the denomination.
Yeah, that's got to come from somebody that's worked inside, because just your run-of-the-mill preacher who has a congregation out here at a church doesn't understand what they're going through.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that, a prison chaplain has to have an ecclesiastical endorsement in order to serve inside that institution. The federal system requires that. Most state Department of Corrections require that. Many jail systems require that. So it's kind of hit and miss between some of them, but primarily they look for an ecclesiastical endorsement, and that's what we do. So we vet our people and put them forward to the systems, and that's what I'm part of.
Well, before we go any farther into some of the questions and things I have, I'd like to back up a little and hear about you and how you got there, and where'd you grow up at?
Yeah, I'm originally from Davenport, Iowa. Was raised in, a religious home. Was, pretty Midwest background, Quad City area, and had no idea that I would ever end up a prison chaplain. We spoke about that the other day, and I went in the military right out of high school. Went into the military, and that was very formative in my life. And while I was in the Army, I became a Christian, and about halfway through my 4-year stint, received Christ as my Savior. Totally changed the trajectory of my life. And was then subsequently sensed a call into the ministry about 3 years after that. So in the mid 80s, got out of the Army and went to Bible college. I met my wife and we got married, and subsequently had 3 children, and it's been a life of ministry. While I was in the ministry, in the local church, I thought that, I would go back into the military as a chaplain. And so you gotta have a master's of divinity in order to do that. And so I didn't like the thought of that. And I said, well, Lord, if you're calling me into the military chaplaincy, then you're going to help me get the master of divinity. I'm not the greatest student, I'll be honest with you, in formal education, but anyway, we moved to Springfield, Missouri, went to the Assemblies of God Seminary, was earning my MDiv, and entered into the chaplain candidate program with the military. And during that process, I discovered the Federal Bureau of Prisons and had done some jail ministry in the past. Kind of piqued my interest, had a couple of friends that were going into the Bureau of Prisons. And I just sensed, over time, the Lord kind of directing me and changing some of my thought patterns and my desires, and I began to pursue looking into going into the correctional world on a full-time basis. And so I ended up doing that and stayed in the Army Reserves. So I did both. I was a military chaplain in the reserves and a full-time federal prison chaplain did that together for many years. Received a deployment out of the deal in 2003, 2004 time frame. I was in a MP battalion, and lo and behold, I get deployed. I'm a full-time prison guy, and what do we do? We get deployed to go to Guantanamo Bay and run a prison down there. And so I spent a year in the sun down in Cuba at the Guantanamo Bay detention facility there for terrorists that were rounded up after 9/11. So it was quite an experience, eye-opening experience, very personal growth experience. And so, kind of sums it up until I retired in 2017. Just a good career, I feel like, and it was
it sounds like an amazing experience. Career. I kind of wonder, how was it going back and forth between, because I have a whole different, I don't have a Father Mulcahy, idea about prison or military chaplains, but they have a very important, very certain job, but the clientele's different. And then going from there to prison chaplain, and you were doing both at the same time for a while. How was that?
Right. So, if were you referring to the Guantanamo Bay experience when I was taking care of soldiers and taking care of...
even more so. You're doing both at the same place. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting because, you're taking care of the MPs, the soldiers, those that were in the detention. We would, in the Bureau, we refer to them as the correctional staff and the custody staff. For the detainees, my primary responsibility was accommodation, making sure that they had what they were authorized to have to practice their faith and to be an advisor to the commander. So that was a huge task, trying to keep that between the lines and in the Bureau of Prisons, everybody kind of expects, and they understand the piece of religion, how religious accommodation plays into everything. Not so much in the military, so that was, a lot of training, explaining, and helping them to understand what some of the tenets of different faiths are. So in the Bureau of Prison.
Did you have someone who was
sorry, go ahead.
Of a Muslim faith down there with you, or was it study on your part trying to figure out what those guys needed and what they had coming?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. We had a Muslim chaplain that was an active duty chaplain that was there. He got kind of, I don't know if you remember back then, but it was kind of in national news. There was, some controversy over the active duty Muslim chaplain. They ended up bringing another one in. So yeah, they were helpful to the command in a lot of those things, but it was just the perspective. I guess I had the relationships necessary to be able to speak to the system.
Wow, very interesting. And then when you're not doing that, you're helping soldiers who are, of course, away from home and in a very stressful mission there. I've seen some of the videos and stuff from,
right.
Their use of forces and stuff, and they were, it wasn't just a walk in the park.
Yeah, it was some very dramatic moments of inmate management. Let's put it that way. I was a bit surprised sometimes to see some of the methods that they used. Nothing that was against the law, I guess. At least when I was around, maybe I was doing my job, and just representing as the chaplain. And, that is part of the chaplain's job in the military, is to show up, and people kind of sometimes change it, not all the time, but change their behavior and respect the
absolutely
the role of the chaplain. So,
So you and I met in I worked at Springfield from 2001 to 2014. And then you were at Springfield what time period?
Yeah, I got there in May of 2010. And I believe you were a GS-8 officer then. And then as I was thinking back on it, and then I remember you making 9 lieutenant, and then I don't know if you made 11 lieutenant there, or if you went.
Yep, I did go ahead and make the 11 there before I transferred. But, I transferred out in end of 2014. But that's quite a mission there that we had also, with all the mental health and even the chaplains there. You had a very wide swath of cadre inmates who probably didn't need as much attention. And then you dealt with a lot of medical inmates some of those were dealing with medical issues, cancer, death. And then you had the mental health inmates, who bring their own challenges for everybody. So tell me a little bit about that. How was your time at Springfield?
Well, when I transferred to Springfield, I was coming from Terre Haute, Indiana, which is a USP and an FCI and a large camp. So we had like 3,200 inmates, and it was federal death row was there. We had a communications management unit. So there was just so much going on. We had the National Bus Center. So there was a lot of traffic going in and out of there, and just a lot of activity. Then I come to Springfield, and by the way, we had like 650 staff at Terre Haute, and for 3,200 inmates. And then I come to Springfield, we had about 650 staff, or around 600, somewhere around there, for 1,000 inmates. So it was a big change there. It was much more ministry, a different ministry focus for me. And as you said, with the medical mission and the mental health mission, and just the ongoing, those that are there designated to serve their time there. So had a wide variety. And then with the different staff, the medical staff, a lot of professional staff, the psych staff that are there, lot of great interactions, ministry towards those that are at a very needful time in their life. And I came in, had a great department, I was a supervisory chaplain, so I came in, I felt like I got the keys to a Cadillac, and just kept it going and just enjoyed it. It was just a breath of fresh air for me. And after the, the penitentiary experience. And so it was
well,
great.
I spent about
great.
14 years of my career at Springfield. And that's what I was talking about the other day with that college class was my time there. And that's what got us into the discussion of, my faith. And I felt like I was pretty honest with them. I was raised up a Christian. I went to church. I went to Bible school every summer. Sometimes our family even went Sundays and Wednesdays. So I was raised up in a church. I saw myself as a Christian. But I went very early into working into the prison. 21 was when I went to work at Missouri State Pen. And almost immediately, I saw some things that really shook my faith, that I thought the world was this way, and I saw a lot of things that the world wasn't this way. Within a couple of months of going to work there, I had a religious volunteer who was caught with an inmate and having sexual relations. I caught a Bible that was cut out that a volunteer had brought in and had marijuana in it. I saw, those were the first, I wasn't raised up with jail. I wasn't raised up with prison. And I didn't, there was mean people. There was mean people in school. There was mean people on the square on Friday night when you got in a fight or something. But I never truly saw evil. The things I saw at Missouri State Pen, which at that time, they called it the bloodiest 47 acres in America, and it held to that name. There were regular inmate killings, people mutilating each other. At that level, I was seeing stuff. That really shook me. And I think I struggled. I still do. I'm not going to tell you. I'm even retired. I still struggle with it. Where God falls in that. That was where we started with that conversation the other day. And I was doing some cleaning up around here. And before I go any farther, I found something the other day, and it spoke to me, and I hadn't seen it in years. But when you graduated, I don't know if people still do it, but you used to get Bibles. Everybody would give you a Bible when you graduated high school. I got 3 of them. And I was going through some books, and all 3 of them, they had written the same thing in the front, which was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and, don't lean into thine own understanding. So I've always had this, I've always had this where I questioned. So that was seen by my pastor. It was seen by my, school friends and stuff, that I was always questioning that. And then maybe prison gave me a reason to really question it. So what have you seen over the years with, and I'm going to move more towards staff, because that's where I think I want to focus with this. Have you had staff come to you and have these discussions, and have you been able to talk to them about some of their faith and lack of faith that's caused by prison and working in prison? Or how about yourself?
Yeah, that's the regiment in the correctional system. And I started at MCC Chicago. That was an institution. It was more like a federal jail, downtown Chicago. And, it's a fast-paced institution, lots of activity going on, inmates going back and forth to court, and a lot of drama when they would get sentenced and things like that. So it was ministry towards kind of a lot of turnover. So you'd see a guy one day to be gone the next, and then I went from there down to Terre Haute, more long-term inmates there, life sentences, staff that had been there for generations, generational type things,
death
a lot
row.
of homesteaders, we call them. We at that point the death row was still waiting.
Yep.
It wasn't quite into fruition yet. This was 1995. I got there. It was just more oppressive. That place, and you could feel it, you could sense it. And the staff would be, they were, for the newbie that was coming in, they kind of, they kind of tested you and things. And So you had to kind of stay on your game. Didn't want to mess up. If you messed up, then they held it over your head and everything. So there was some of that, but I did well. Over time you build relationships with people and you start to talk to people. And there is the change that takes place in people's life. And, the correctional staff that you see that are old and crusty and angry and jaded, you wonder all the layers, what they've seen, and what was the journey that got them there. You gotta, just told me, man, you gotta take care of yourself. You really do, because it is a heavy duty environment. And I do attribute a lot of it to a spiritual aspect. As a chaplain, naturally I'm going to do that, but as a man of God, I see the prison as a condensed spiritual environment, just all these things that are compact into this small area and is just swirling about. And, it manifests in different ways and it attacks, it attacks and people might not identify it for what it is, but it is it's spiritual warfare that's going on all around. And it has its effects. Those that consider themselves religious or a Christian or spiritual in a matter of any sense of the word there, that they may be able to define it, but I understood it for what it was. And I always would talk to people. I'd pray with them about situations. Just try to encourage them. The reconciling of one's faith, coming inside the institution, is like, man, where is God in all this? Don't think I never had those discussions with myself, because, the average pastor is out there, he's dealing with people that are, come to their church and you're preaching the gospel and ministering to them. Me, I'm going inside of a facility and I'm having people cuss at me and I'm seeing things. I'm seeing people, attack one another, and I've seen some blood. I've seen staff assaulted. I've seen all those type of things. It does over time. My wife, she told me, she said, the way that when I came home, it really kind of woke me up. She told me one time, we're not inmates here, and I had to do this self-awareness check, of, am I in survival mode sometimes? And am I bringing this home? So I got to find a way to reconcile this and be able to carry myself properly, and not let the things that I see around me start to pile up. I need a release. I need to let some of this go. So I started meeting with my pastor at our church that we were attending. I started meeting with him on Sunday morning before I'd go into the institution. I would go in with him. It would be early too, because I'd get there institution like 7 a.m. So I'd be getting up like 4:30 on Sunday morning. Get to the church about 5:15. We'd pray, for about to 6:15. Then we'd sit and we'd talk. We'd pray over the church, and then we'd talk. And that's when I was able to really kind of gain my perspective and kind of refresh myself. And so that was really a way that I took care of myself and reconciled some of the spiritual
great friend and pastor
around me. So
to do that.
Yeah. Well, he actually was, he came into the prison, had been a prison volunteer himself. So he understood a lot of the aspects of prison ministry and at least going inside.
This is one of the subjects I wanted to talk about is prison volunteers. I've been on both sides. I've been, a captain in an institution. So I've seen the place that they fill, but I've also been on the other side and seen the contraband, the problems that come with the volunteers. Personally, I've always had this thought in my head, why are they here? Why are they not at a nursing home? Why are they not building a playground for children who haven't went to prison yet? That's my own personal thoughts on that. But tell me a little bit about volunteers and how you look towards that. I know they help the chaplaincy take over the part of that workload.
Oh yeah. Well, you're expected. You got all these different inmates, and you got all different backgrounds, and you're expected within the system to have a volunteer program, and so you have to manage that the best you can, and so you're recruiting volunteers. Some of the volunteers you inherit, they've been coming in for years and years and years and years, and you can't get rid of them sometimes. I'm sorry, they just there's nothing more faithful than a prison volunteer, because they just don't know when to quit. They get in there and they love to minister to the inmates.
Yeah,
why is that? Well, I think you got to ask, why did we go inside the prison? And I know we were getting a paycheck. We were getting paid to do it. That was a job. We had to feed our families. But why do they do it? Well, I think most of them were evangelical. I'll use that term. And from a biblical point of view, it's a biblical mandate to visit prisons, to remember those that are in prison, to go and to not forget those that are incarcerated. And Jesus identified with the prisoner, both at the beginning of his ministry, throughout his ministry, and at the end of his ministry. He was falsely accused and nailed to a cross between two thieves, two criminals. So he identifies with the criminal. So from a Christian perspective, it is a biblical mandate to visit, not forget those that are in prison. So volunteers do that, and not all of them stay forever. Some come and go, and they do services. And I tell you, there's been a few over my time that we had to let go. They were, before the automation of many of the systems, you'd find out that one was talking to one on the telephone, and, or had received a letter and didn't tell anybody about it. But once they automated things and they started running some of that stuff, they could detect pretty quickly who is calling who, and then the front entrance procedures changed, where we tightened that up with the X-ray machines, the metal detectors. It was before when I first started, we weren't running the volunteers through metal detectors, or running their things through an X-ray machine. So the front entrance procedures changed. I think it cut down on some of the problems there. Did I answer your question as far as why do I think that volunteers come in? I've heard staff over the years say, why don't they go do something else? There's so many different other things that they could be doing. Why don't they spend their time helping, a kid out on, but it's trust me, sometimes I agreed with that. And many of the volunteers, when they volunteer not only at prisons, but they volunteer in other places. They invest
there's
themselves.
Good ones and bad ones, absolutely, and everything.
And definitely, and I'm not here to to defend every single one of them, but there are so many volunteers that I appreciate so much. They had a heart, and they came prepared. Had an impact. The inmates appreciated them. The inmates kind of look at me and see that. That name tag with the the government symbol on there. And they're going to say, you're paid, you're a government man. But this volunteer's coming in and he's doing it, he or she's doing it for free. And they're coming in just for me, to help me. So they have a different relationship. They have a different impact on somebody's life. And so, you can't deny that. You can't change the perspective from the inmate. So I value volunteers very much. The institution certainly couldn't do a lot of the things that it did without, at least from my point of view, without them. The society in general, when a lot of what's the percentage, Mike, that
Most
inmates
of
are
them,
going to
yeah,
get out of prison?
80, 85.
It's like 95%. Yeah. That volunteer who served as a mentor or to help them along the way. There's people that volunteer on the outside in reentry programs as well to help them enter back into the community. So if somebody's coming out of prison and moving in, into my neighborhood, I'm hoping that they had a good experience with some volunteers that mentored them and to help them through, rather than come into my neighborhood as an angry individual ready to, cause havoc. So the positive impact that they make is far outweighs any of the negatives.
And they fill a
that we
void
could
for
have
you
ever
guys
imagined.
because, I don't know what the final count is for the Bureau of Prisons, but how many religions are recognized? And
yeah, you say that, and there's I think the Bureau of Prisons recognizes, when I retired, and it changes every day, but there was about 35 recognized religions. If you had a group that was meeting in the chapel, you tried to get, volunteers that would come in for them.
right.
But that was like pulling teeth. The Christian ones, it wasn't hard. They'd be calling you. I had to turn a lot of people down. The others, you might be able to get them with a contract. You pay them to come in and things like that. But that was the difference. I think Christian people would come in for free, do it from their heart. Some of these other religions, I'm not bad mouthing the other religions. I'm just pointing out an observation that I saw over the years, that if you pay them, they'll come in, but if not, they're not interested in coming in.
That brings up the different religions. It brings up another question. You, as a Christian and as a Christian chaplain, how did you deal with some of the recognized religions like or Wiccan, or what was the Viking, Asatru? How did you deal with some of that stuff? And you have to provide that, but at the same time, a lot of what they believe and think goes really against your beliefs. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah. Well, as Christianity brings freedom, and I believe the United States was born, as a Christian nation, and has that freedom because of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. From that came our Constitution, and our Constitution has the free exercise of religion clause in there, which is within the First Amendment, which is really undergirds our entire society in our government. And if that goes away,
I agree.
Our freedoms are gone, pretty much. So within the prison, which is like a small city, you have to have the freedom to exercise religion. And my thought is trying to get it out here. This is one of those where you'll have to, but you'll have to understand the free exercise clause. We're always accommodating faith. I always, am reminded of who I am in Christ. I would have other pastors tell me, say, "Well, I don't know how you can do what you do. You're paving the way to hell for providing all these, these other religions." And I said, "Well, how many Native Americans have you interacted with today, or how many Muslims have you interacted with today?" Yeah, I was accommodating their faith, but I was also in relationship with them. I would work with them. I would demonstrate to them a care and a compassion that how they, maybe they didn't respond, our relationship didn't blossom, or whatever you want to say, but it was a pastoral relationship that I maintained with all the inmates that came into the chapel. Yeah, I was accommodating their faith. We spent some of our funding on things to help them to exercise their faith. But that was the whole thing, is to support constitutional
I will
mandates.
say that being a small student of history, though, I don't think our forefathers in any manner whatsoever, when they thought about freedom of religion, they thought about freedom of Christian religion. They were thinking about Quakers. They were thinking about, those type of religions. I don't think they ever crossed their mind that there'd be Wiccans falling under that. But
Totally agree with you.
I do know that, and just this is from the lieutenant's point of view, that what you guys do with those groups, if nothing else, in keeping them involved and keeping them active in their beliefs, it gives them something to lose, I guess is kind of the way to put it. So as a management tool, and not just as a management tool, but from my point of view, it's almost a management tool. Those inmates that have something to lose, they can't go to that service, they can't get that thing for their religion, if they're locked up or if they're, sanctioned, tend to behave better. From a management point of view, I also saw that and what you guys do and the importance of it there.
Yeah, it was, they lose a lot of rights when they come to prison, but one of the rights they don't lose is their freedom to express their faith. Where that rub comes in is where corrections or the security of the institution conflicts with some of the religious tenets or practices that faith may have. And so we have to find the least restrictive. And this is where, the custody staff or the lieutenant would say, you're going to let them do what? And we don't do that here. I've never seen that done before. When, there's court precedents, there's administrative precedents that takes place that goes all the way up through courts, that comes back down into policy. And we have to accommodate within the least restrictive means. We just can't say no. Like in the old days, they would just say, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. And now it's like we have to evaluate every single request. It doesn't matter how crazy it is. You have to find a way, because whatever it's called a sincerely held belief. If an inmate, says, I want to worship that cement block over there on the wall, it's like, okay. And you can go over there and sit and watch that cement block, and you can, watch that cement block. I mean, you can't just blow them off, is my point. You just can't blow them off. And I think there was a lot of that in parts of, I saw that throughout my career, and sometimes people ended up in lawsuits. And you're gonna find yourself in a lawsuit, even for doing the right thing. You'll find yourself in a lawsuit. I found myself, I was sued 4 times. Fortunately, it never went to court. The system always backed me up because I was within the scope of my employment, which I was within policy. So the system backed me up. And, those things never went to court. They were found to be not worthy or whatever. But still, the point that I'm trying to make is that we had to take everything serious. And we, these things that I would totally disagree with, they would have to hold my nose and advocate for, and keep a straight face. A lot of times just explaining some of these things. And one time during, and I always had to be aware that even staff in our changing society, our staff that are coming in are in some of these religious groups. And, I was, toward the end of my career, I was doing annual refresher training, and I was doing the religious portion, and there was something about Wiccan. And I caught myself. I was gonna try to be funny, or say something a little sarcastic that correctional folks can identify with. They love it when you're sarcastic. They love it when you kind of slam a little bit, So I was trying to roll with that, and I caught myself, and I stopped myself. Thankfully, I did, because afterwards, a female correctional officer came up to me and said, "Hey, chaplain, if there's anything that you need help with when it comes to Wiccans, I'm a Wiccan, and I do this, and this, and if there's an inmate that's asking for this, I can maybe help you as far as maybe a subject matter expert on this." And I was like, "Oh, thank God I didn't, make that comment that went through my mind. I would have offended this person and been in, you just have to understand we're in a different world now, Mike. We're in a different world. I mean, it's all around. These guys are coming to prison and they're practice these faiths. Some of them are discovered when they come to prison. Some are doing it for protection. Some are in a gang. And when I first came into the system, I was naive. I didn't see all those things, and I had a correctional officer tell me, said the only thing that goes on inside there's gang activity. And I was going, "Oh, come on, they're not." Right. He was the corridor officer. He goes, "Yeah, the only thing that goes on," and I said, "No, that's not. They're coming down. Some of them are coming down to
right.
get with God and change their life." And he goes, "No. The only thing goes on in there is gang activity." And I have to say that somewhere along the line, I found a strike between in the balance there, that I recognized that, yes, there was gang activity going on inside of the chapel. Inmates will abuse. They'll use things for their advantage. But yet I couldn't, based on, we just monitored, we would sit there and listen to what they're saying and things like that. We reviewed their videos and made sure there wasn't radical things being said in there. And so we did the best we could to curtail a lot of that stuff. But yeah, inmates are always going to maybe abuse some things, but then there's those that come down, they appreciate the chapel, they find some solace away from the, the regiment of the institution and the craziness of the institution. And you try to welcome them in and, care for them and provide a compassionate care for them. And I'll be honest with you, Mike, nobody entered into that institution that had to strike that balance more than a chaplain.
Absolutely.
Because I want to be seen by you. I want to be seen by you as somebody that's toeing the line. I got the security part down. You don't have to worry about me. I'm taking care of business up there in the chapel. You don't got to worry about the inmates running over me. But I also want the inmates to be approachable to the inmates, So I'm in this balance. I'm trying to have a correctional hat on, and I'm trying to be a pastor too. So that was really a dichotomy that was,
and Springfield
difficult
was probably
at times, I'll be honest with you.
You did have a great, while you were there and even before, the chaplain that was there before you was a supervisor. Springfield's always had good chaplains who would come down to the lieutenant's office and say, "Hey, we're going to do this, or this is going on. Wanted you guys aware ahead of time, or should we do this?" And we were able to go to you and say, "Is this something we could hold off, or could we have this here and instead of having it here because of what's going on in the institution?" And I didn't have that everywhere. I spent 2 years fighting.
Yeah.
I think it's the Jewish faith. They have a deal with like a 35-inch leather. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, that's called the tefillin.
Oh my gosh, I spent 2 years fighting over whether or not to give that to inmates in SAG, and it's got 35 inches of leather. That chaplain he couldn't see it. He just, they got to have it. They can't have it, chaplain. These are special management unit inmates, and so I never had that at Springfield. I always felt like I could walk into the chaplain's offices down there and say, "Hey, this is what's going on. What do you guys think?" And I felt like you guys did the same thing back.
Well, Springfield, one of the things about Springfield is you had more seasoned chaplains there, and long tenured chaplains. It wasn't a revolving door. And so they knew the staff, they knew the institution, they had the lay of the land, and they had the respect of the staff. So that goes a long way. Some institutions, you come in there and there's the chaplain's changing all the time. And so they don't have that historical background. They don't have the respect on the compound. They don't have the relationships established, the level of trust that's necessary to be effective. and to do what you need to do. So a lot of times, you get, the correctional staff would be obstructive to what you're doing or aloof to what you're doing, and be difficult. One of the biggest changes to the operation and institution is during Ramadan for the Muslim inmates. That's a huge shift. And, prisons are all about routine and, counts and doing things on a regimented way. And when you want to disrupt that, that's a difficult task. Well, when I became supervisor, I began talking to the correctional staff, the evening watch correctional staff, because the evening watch was the main one it impacted. And I started talking to all them and having their input into the memo that was going to be signed by the warden.
Sure.
And I'd let them review it and look at it and stuff. And you wouldn't believe how much respect I got just from doing that and allowing them to critique some of the things or whatever, have ideas. And that was so helpful to me. So learned a lot, just kind of.
And that didn't put you and the custody staff on opposite sides of it. That way you guys had come together and it was, team play that way.
Yeah. They didn't feel like they were having stuff rammed down their throat that way. If they have input and then they go, you're the first chaplain who ever asked me my opinion on that. And I said, well, that's your opinion's valued. And I appreciate what you do, because you're making this happen, and you're the one that's having to deal with the inmates, letting them out at the right time and letting them back in and, doing this and that. So
feeding them after dark. And
it was
and
good.
One of the things, Ramadan's a good example of when you see some inmates. Now, I agree with you completely. There's inmates who take the religious services and that's a solace for them and they get a lot out of it. But then you see the ones who they're only want anything to do with the Muslim religion during Ramadan because they get different food. You guys vetting those inmates and making sure that they're following their religion all year long, not just when the food's different. Stuff like that is a very big part.
Yeah, that is overarching. The staff are always like, Chaplain, I saw that guy in the dining room at lunchtime eating, and you need to take him off the list. And it's like, well, sometimes you'd be heavy. I learned if you're heavy-handed, then it's going to be, sometimes it'll backfire on you. So I said, you want to be tough with the correctional. Yeah, you're right. Oh, I get them right. I get that guy. And, so then, it's like I pulled the inmate up and I said, all right, you've been identified by some staff as coming in and eating during lunch and you're on Ramadan. Everybody knows you're on Ramadan. Well, yeah, Chaplain, I came in because, and I said, well, this is your warning. The second, this one's on me. The next one's on you. So it's documented and you're getting a moment of grace here. So it's your opportunity to screw it up. It's a correctional institution. You're not there to punish them. It's there to correct them, to help them figure it out. How to make right decisions. Are we successful all the time? No, but every opportunity.
It's too bad because I do think that a few inmate they cause correctional staff to judge a lot of the inmates. I'm still guilty to this day. One of the things I always saw with inmates who were pretending, in my opinion, to be religious was when you'd see them in the hallway. They were the inmate that walked down the hallway, and everybody they saw, they said, I'm blessed. How are you today? I'm blessed. I'm blessed. To this day, if the guy at the convenience store says, I'm blessed, I'm checking my billfold because I think he's lying because that's just how my brain has taken that. But I know not everybody that feels like they're blessed is, doing something wrong or lying.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I was at a store just a couple of days ago, and the guy was calling me boss, and I wanted to ask him. I said, "Where'd you do time at?" But I refrained.
Our ears perk up on that type of stuff. Let me get. I've got one more thing that I kind of want to go off into, and it's kind of where I went in that college class, and that is the evil that we see.
Yeah.
like we talked about, you've seen blood, I've seen blood. I've read the PSIs. I mean, we had one inmate there at Springfield, when he was a
Right.
young, PSI is a pre-sentencing investigation, and it tells us, the inmate's life before they got locked up. And it's used a lot in counseling and stuff for those that don't know. But his pre-sentence investigation, when he was 5, 6, 7 years old, his parents would put him in a barrel, put the lid on, and walk by all day hitting it with a steel bar to punish him. Of course, there's pedophiles in prison, and I guess I really have a very soft spot for children. I don't believe that they've had the chance to deserve the things that happened to them. Those are the things I see that are truly evil, and the things I saw that were evil. And I know that people have told me in the past, well, in order for there to be evil or good, there has to be evil. That's kind of the blanket statement. How do you wrap your head around evil and what we see in prison that's evil? Does that make sense?
Yeah. We live in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world, and only way it is going to ever be fixed is by the Lord Jesus Christ coming back, changing, everything. And it's coming to that. I mean, from a biblical point of view, it's coming to that. But in the meantime, we have to tend to these things, these effects. And what you were describing is trauma. The trauma that some of these guys experience coming up in life, then they turn around and start committing crimes at a young age. And it is all a result of that fallen nature, that sinful nature that each and every one of us have. In you or me, both of us have the capabilities to do, and I'm going to be careful here what I say, because sometimes things are misunderstood. What I'm trying to say is every human being is fallen and potential to do evil. Everybody's born out of the womb. I mean, there's that precious little baby. You never see that little baby, being a hardened criminal. It's that fallen nature that's in there, and the only thing that can change that is a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And God doesn't give up on people. God doesn't give up on people. It's never too far. I think I know from a biblical perspective, the only sin that cannot be forgiven is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And Jesus said that. All these others, the pedophiles, the murderers, the rapists, just all the horrific crimes. Can an individual be forgiven for that? Yes, they can. But at the same time, if they don't, it's going to continue to manifest, and their life is hard. I was thinking about it when you said pure evil, and how would I define pure evil? And I would say, in an individual, I would say it's the lack of conscience. Right. The conscience is gone. And I think then that the powers of darkness or evil, however you want to say it, just got full reign in an individual's life, and they're capable of doing anything. So that's when they're dangerous. And I've seen people like that too. I've dealt with people that came to the chapel like that, and they're scary people. They're scary people because, I've looked them right in the eye too. And I know some of them wanted to take my head off because I'm having to tell them, no, you can't do that. It was just God's hand of protection, I think, a lot of times, because there would be no other staff around.
Well, God can give those people forgiveness. I don't know that I'm able to. And I wish some of them would get there quicker for him to make his decision. And that's just I don't know if that's the human.
I agree with you.
Or whatever, but that really is where a lot of my coming to terms with that exists, is right there at that level. They can be forgiven by God, but they can't ever be forgiven on this earth for some of the stuff they've done.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can't be cheap either. It can't be one of those, well, I just want to get, I just don't want to pay any consequences for that. No, we believe there's
Mm-hmm.
consequences for sin. You can be forgiven by God, but there's still consequences on this. That's why we have death penalty. There was death penalty in the Bible. There was, you can have forgiveness for your soul, but your body belongs to the government. You got to pay the consequences because that's what justice requires. Sometimes, you talk like that to some inmates, boy, they go, "You're not a man of God." I served as at an institution that had federal death row for 10 years because I was at Terre Haute twice. I don't know if I shared that. I was at Terre Haute twice. I came back and the death row was fully staffed and inmates. And I saw it grow from 21 to 60 inmates in a matter of 10-year time. But those were, some interesting times there in reconciling some of the things that they had done. And they would ask me, said, "Do you believe in death penalty?"
Right.
First question, I'd say, well, first of all, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. We all have a death sentence. We all have a death sentence. I might walk out of here today and get hit by a car on the way home and die. The thing that's most important to me is where will you spend eternity? If you were to die today, if you were to lay down in your bunk and your heart would stop, where would you go, heaven or hell? And so I'd try to turn it on them and bring it in. And that is the right perspective.
It's not other people's beliefs. It's how they believe and how they carry themselves from that point on.
Yeah. So I said, well, so I'm here to help you along the way, to encourage you, and for all of us to find our way with God. No matter what the individual's done, that's between them and the Lord. But as far as you serving out your sentence, you got to serve your sentence because there's consequences to what you do. I did want to share this story though on a positive note. Out of a 23-year career in the Bureau, if I look back on it, I can think of just a handful of inmates, that I will remember throughout the remainder of my life that they were completely sincere. And there's one guy, he didn't get saved under my ministry. He came to the facility I was at. I met him. I did the standoff at first. I accept him in, but then I let you prove yourself, and I watch you. I watch you to see if you're sincere. And this guy was so sincere. He had the respect of the staff and the inmates. And then he was going to get paroled. He was under an old system. He was going to get paroled. And he thought he was going to get out after 25 years. And a volunteer, I'd left that facility, and a volunteer had gotten to know him, and I still am in contact with that volunteer, good friend of mine. And he told me, this guy's name is Bobby. I'll just share his first name. And the volunteer told me, Bobby's going to be getting out of prison. He's getting paroled. And I said, that's great. That's great. So he packed Bobby out, and he goes down to R&D. He's getting ready to go out. And then when he's down there, the state of Oklahoma was waiting on him. He had a detainer for another charge that was there pending from years ago. And they picked him up, and they took him there. The staff in R&D heard him say, well, he goes, I guess the Lord's not through with me yet. I got more to do, and the Lord's got a reason. The Lord's got a purpose. When somebody has that kind of attitude and it is submitted like that, they got my complete respect. And so I'm like, okay, that's the
way he had looked at it to get him through prison.
Thank God for
that
those
was the kind of faith that kept him going. And I do believe that a lot of inmates do grab hold of that and are able to do that. So before I let you go, so what would you say to the officers out there who are, having those conflicting thoughts? They don't quite know where they stand with religion. They're working in those prisons, and maybe they need a little bit of faith or uplifting. What would you say?
I think the tendency sometimes, it is a very dark place. Prisons can be a very dark place. It's all about attitude. You got to take care of yourself. You got to be able to not isolate yourself, have people to talk to. When you see things, you need to get those out, those debrief some of those things, and constantly be looking for ways to relax and understand, keep things in right perspective. As a pastor, I'll tell you, you need to be plugged into a church. You know, you need to try to get plugged into a church. If that's not going to work for you, you need to do some of the things that taking care of yourself, getting connected with other people and talking things out and having the support of others, not internalizing things, but letting things out. Understand that people are going to do what they're going to do, and inmates are going to, things aren't going to match up all the time. And if we're out in society, that same thing is going on out in society. That's not unique to prisoners. We just see it. We just see it in the prisoners because we see them on a regular basis. So, don't get jaded. The temptation is to get jaded and to see everybody as insincere, and that's why when we retire out of corrections, we want to have productive lives after we retire, and you want to have a fulfilling family life. You want to be happy in life. You don't want to be depressed. But it can get you, man. If you're not careful, it can get you. So just do all you can to find that support, not stay isolated. Always look for somebody that can speak into your life, positive things, and not every inmate's trying to.
And
play
that may just be another correctional officer that can speak to your life. Because I know there were, and we talked the other day. I'm not going to say their names, but there were a couple of officers who, they used their Christianity as a shield when they walked around inside. And I've seen others at other places I've worked, but they didn't hide it. It was very much a part of them as an officer. Maybe sometimes you lean on those guys. Yeah.
And I right, exactly. And if your faith is in there and it's flickering, fan the flame. You don't have to let your faith die or not be able to express your faith. You can be a man of faith, a woman of faith, and to keep things in right perspective. There's these things are going to be happening. Jesus told us, think these things not to be strange, or we're going to have tribulation, we're going to have trouble, but understand, I'm with you. So I'm glad that the Lord was with me. When I went into those facilities, I was glad the Lord was with me, and I honestly sensed, that God was with me, and I would always ask for the Lord to be with me. And he said he'll be our protector. He that dwells in the secret place of the Almighty shall dwell in the presence of Almighty God. So, I just thank God for his protection.
I thank you for taking the time to do this. I got so lucky when I wanted to have this conversation, and I racked my brain a little bit trying to figure out who would be the perfect person to, have this conversation with me. And I think reconnecting with you was just the perfect fit. I can't think anybody else I'd rather have had on here for this conversation. And I thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, it's been a blessing to me, and to be able to pass along any words of wisdom or encouragement to those that are in corrections and working, inside of facilities and, around, difficult, needy clientele that are very demanding. It takes a lot out of you, so you got to put back in. Take care of yourself.
Is there, if someone was interested in joining as a prison chaplain, is there information you'd like to give them or tell them where they could go to get that information?
Well, as the Assemblies of God, I would say you can go right to chaplaincy@ag.org. You can check us out there. You can do internet searches and see most denominations, major Christian denominations, are going to have a chaplaincy program, and to see what it takes to become a prison chaplain. As we talked in the past,
Right.
I want to become a prison chaplain. That
Right.
there's nothing glamorous about that. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but it is fulfilling, and I believe it's a calling that comes along with that. So if you're not within God's calling and in the will of God, you'll be miserable because
Sure.
you're not cut out for it. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. It's not just a job. So if you want to be effective, you can go in there and do a job, but if you want to be effective and feel like you're making a difference, then you need to be called.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Daniel O'Dean, and I appreciate you being here. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mike. God bless.
Okay. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.